Quite a grey and dank day on offer, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland, where once again we're set to see that rain and drizzle continue. On the whole, temperatures are widely above average, particularly in the far northwest, where it's going to be very mild for the time of year. But elsewhere, temperatures more towards average for the time of year, but feeling slightly cooler than it has done of late. Into the evening, we'll see fairly similar conditions. Once again, plenty of cloud around with the odd clear spell, and we're seeing longer spells of rain and drizzle just start to creep in once again to the very far northwest of Scotland. And as we head into the weekend, still plenty of cloud around, which means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly for most.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays up in North Lanarkshire on the northbound carriageway of the M80. It's partly blocked from junction 5 to 6 near Cumbernauld at the scene of an accident of queues back towards Glasgow, back towards the M73, I would say. On the M6 in Staffordshire, one lane shut northbound from junction 15 to the Kill services just north of Stoke-on-Trent. A lorry caught fire. Recovery work continues in the inside lane. And further south on the M42 northbound in the West Midlands, a car's broken down just after junction 6, the Birmingham Airport turn-off in the roadworks, causing queues back to junction 4, the Shirley-Dorridge exit. South London at Dulwich, the South Circular is closed eastbound. Recovery works underway following an accident at the junction at College Road. And in Berkshire on the M4 westbound, the motorway is partly blocked from the M25 to junction 5 at Langley, where a car's broken down. That's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, the Home Secretary has issued an update on the rape gang situation. Some local inquiries announced and a few other things. But I've got to tell you, so many people saying it categorically does not go far enough. Also, Kemi Badenoch, listen to this.
We are a great country, but we've lost our way.
We most certainly have lost our way, but are the Tories the right ones to make us find it again? She issued her first major speech of 2025, so we'll take a look at that. Also coming up tonight, a ceasefire is potentially imminent in Gaza. There's been calls now for a reunification scheme similar to that we saw for Ukraine. Would you support that or not? And Sweden, they say that migrants should have to prove they respect Western values. Many say that we should follow suit. Should we? And how would that work?
We've got all of that and lots more. And keeping me company tonight, 2 new faces to the panel. We've got the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, and Kieran Adrenew, the political commentator. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story at 6 o'clock. Well, far too little action. That was the Home Secretary's damning verdict as she unveiled a new national-level rapid audit of grooming gangs and new local inquiries. Yvette Cooper's announced tougher sentences, mandatory reporting and expanded investigations to cover recent cases. The government will also support victim-centred local inquiries in Oldham and 4 other pilot areas.
All those national inquiries, reports and hundreds of recommendations, far too little action has been taken and shamefully little progress has been made. The most important task should be to increase police investigations into these horrific crimes and get abusers behind bars. We will introduce stronger sentences for child grooming, making it an aggravating factor to organise abuse and exploitation. And I can announce new action today to help victims get more investigations and prosecutions underway.
Well, it comes after weeks of pressure now on the government for a new national inquiry into grooming gangs, with the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch and even Elon Musk saying local probes aren't enough. The Shadow Home Secretary has also slammed the government's plans, saying it's totally inadequate. Chris Philp said earlier in the Commons that up to 50 towns are affected and questioned why others are being ignored.
Ignored them, and in some cases even covered up these horrendous crimes because of absurd concerns about so-called cultural sensitivity. 10 days ago, the Prime Minister compounded this by saying it was a far-right bandwagon to raise these issues and call for a proper inquiry. Let me say this, it is not far-right to stand up for rape victims.
In other news tonight, a teenager has been found guilty of murdering the 15-year-old Eliane Andam during a row in London over a teddy bear. Hassan Sentamou stabbed the aspiring lawyer in the neck after stewing over a water-splashing prank the day before. The court heard the 18-year-old had a history of violence and had brought a knife to the scene. Eliane's family hugged as the jury convicted him of murder, while Sentamou was seen crying in the dock. He'll be sentenced in March, with police praising Eliane's friends and a bus driver who comforted her in her final moments. Well, the detective on the case, Becky Woodsford, has been giving a statement outside the Old Bailey. She says Eliane was killed for simply standing up for her friend.
His claim is that he acted through diminished responsibility, and that was never accepted by the prosecution team. And today the jury agreed and they found him guilty of Eliane's murder. We worked together as a team, and during our investigation we've had the opportunity from Michael and Dorcas and Eliane's family to learn what a bright, funny and happy person Eliane was.
Sir Keir Starmer has said that the UK will play its part in guaranteeing Ukraine's security after a peace deal. That's as he makes his first visit to Kyiv as Prime Minister. His trip comes as Russian drones were targeting the city, a reminder of the daily threats that Ukrainians face. The UK has also unveiled a £4.5 billion military aid package, including cutting-edge air defence systems and training for Ukrainian cadets. Sir Keir Starmer's also called for peace through strength, warning that weakness could invite more war and embolden aggressors worldwide. And in a historic move, the 100-year UK-Ukraine partnership has been agreed, cementing ties in defence and in technology. The head of England's largest non-metropolitan police force has today been suspended with immediate effect. Thames Valley's Chief Constable Jason Hogg is under investigation by the IOPC for gross misconduct. That investigation focuses on allegations that he failed to properly investigate the improper retention of sensitive police information. We understand an interim appointment for that role will be made by the end of the month. And strikes set for the next 2 Sundays on Avanti West Coast have been called off, but the dispute isn't quite over yet. Workers from the RMT union had been gearing up for walkouts over rest day working, but after talks with the rail firm, the union has now suspended those strikes to allow for further negotiations. RMT says the suspension shows their commitment to finding a resolution, but warns that future strikes are still on the horizon. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for a full roundup in the next hour or so. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I find it very depressing, that story in the headlines just there. Yet more teenagers killing each other. I mean, no one is ever going to win from this. You just heard there another person, 15, losing their lives. Nobody, I don't think, is fully appreciating the impact that all of this leaves behind, not just the victim that's been murdered, but of course the family now that will lose their child when that person goes to prison. The whole thing is just absolutely tragic. And speaking of tragedy, many of you will remember this face, Jimmy Mizzen. Absolutely awful story back in 2008, of course, when he was killed. Well, fast forward to present day, the person that actually committed that crime went to prison for that crime. Well, he's now been released and has repositioned himself as some kind of, like drill artists, whatever they call themselves now, covering their face with balaclavas, rapping about, violence and all the rest of it. I really hate that genre of music. Maybe I'm just getting to be an old biddy. But when you're rapping about killings, stabbings, all the rest of it, it's pretty disgusting. And then can you imagine being Jimmy Mizzen's family when you find out that that rapper, and I'm not going to even give him his name, thank you very much, don't want to promote him, but imagine being the mother of Jimmy Mizzen to hear that that person is now having music that was then played on the BBC. Yes, you heard that right. The BBC actually played that guy's music. What on earth is this world coming to? The BBC, though, say that they don't glamorise violence. Make of all of that what you will. Anyway, I am with you till 7 o'clock tonight, and alongside me, I said two new faces. But as Jake Wallace-Simons has just reminded me, he was on this programme quite some time ago when we used to have a bigger panel. Do you remember that? We used to have 3 people. If you never saw it then, you missed out. What can I say? But anyway, we welcome him back tonight. Of course, he is the editor of the Jewish Chronicle and definitely a new face. I'm not losing my marbles on this one. Kieran Andrew, a political commentator, new face. Very welcome to the show tonight. As are each and every single one of you at home, and you know the drill. It's not just about us. It is very much about you guys at home. So what's on your mind tonight? Get in touch with me all the usual ways. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay, or of course you can tweet or X me. But today, all eyes on the Commons because the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was speaking out, addressing these rape gangs. There was many people waiting with bated breath. What's she going to announce? A national inquiry. Finally, is she that far right, do you think, to call for that? No, it would appear not. Charlie Peters, you are alongside me now. Bring the viewers up to speed with what happened in the Commons today.
Well, it was always going to be politically impossible for the Home Secretary to call for that national inquiry after the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, referred to people jumping on a bandwagon spread by the poison of the far right just 10 days ago. But it's clear that the pressure on the government from the media and also from the opposition parties, in particular the Conservatives and Reform, have shown a shift in the government's position. So what have they announced today? Several proposals, but the 2 real key ones for me are a 3-month rapid audit of existing evidence on the national scale and nature of child sexual exploitation, particularly by groups. That'll be overseen by Baroness Louise Casey. She conducted a similar review into Rotherham specifically in 2015, which uncovered quite a lot of corruption and cover-ups involved there. So pretty much the go-to investigations pro when it comes to this issue. And secondly, there's additional support, £5 million allocated to a few more local inquiries. Obviously, Kemi Badenoch has been calling for a national inquiry. Reform UK have been calling for a national inquiry. Elon Musk has been calling for a national inquiry. But the government is going to propose funding Telford-style inquiries. So we had a barrister lead an inquiry in Telford, which in 2022 found over 1,000 victims over several decades.
And of course, that one cost £8 million there or thereabouts. So £5 million across 5, many people are saying is not sufficient.
And that is the concern raised by Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham, who really, I think, led to this sea change this week when she put her intervention on Monday, when she called for a 5-point plan. It was interesting that Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, he gave his response. He asked Yvette Cooper, you're going to do these 5 areas. What about the 40-plus other towns where we've seen credible reports of this sort of abuse taking place? When do they need to wait for local reviews? But actually, I think the more effective criticism of the government's position came from their own backbenches when Sarah Champion stood up and said, please will you ensure there are no cover-ups here? Will these local inquiries have statutory footing? E.g., will they compel people to give evidence to be witnesses to the inquiry? They won't. So the Telford-style inquiry gave a lot of evidence, it gave a lot of proof, but nobody was held accountable for that crime. No one's ever been sacked, investigated, or put into a more negative light by virtue of being part of a group of police officers, counsellors, social services who deliberately looked the other way due to fears of racism and having concerns about community cohesion. Exclusive polling seen by GBNews yesterday found that people want people imprisoned for engaging in that sort of cover-up through political correctness or corruption. So, fundamentally, Sarah Champion knows, as do the opposite benches, that these sort of local reviews won't actually get the level of accountability that so many survivors and campaigners have been calling for, and that's the reaction I heard from them this afternoon as well.
Well, there you go. What do you think to it at home? Is it a step forward to addressing some of these issues or not? Jake, your thoughts?
Well, I've got to say, I mean, there's a few good things about it. One is the rapid-fire audit. I mean, it's very good that that will take place. 3 months is a very quick length of time for such an inquiry to take place compared to the COVID inquiry, which is going on forever and costing vast sums of money. But that's really about it. I mean, apart from that, the idea of focusing on just 5 towns when 50 have been affected is outrageous. I mean, what are they seeking to discover that's going to be of any use in fighting this trend across the north, but also elsewhere? If they would have a number of small and quick inquiries across all of the places affected, then I'd be all for it. And of course, then also it would need to have statutory powers to demand evidence, legal powers to do so, to ensure, as Sarah Champion said, there's no cover-up. And the legislation exists for that, 2005 legislation, inquiry legislation. It needs to be applied in this case to make this really work.
And I know what many of you at home feel and think. I've been looking through the inbox. Many of you are saying that you do still want this national inquiry. You don't feel like Yvette Cooper's announcement go anywhere near touching to the point where you feel we need to be on this issue. Many of you, I hear the word Maggie Oliver all the time. That's who you feel should be leading that inquiry. Kieran, your thoughts?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that every victim deserves justice and every perpetrator ought to be brought to justice, regardless of their ethnic background. I think that's the first thing to emphasise. You know, fundamentally, this is an issue of state and institutional failures in the first place. And also, it's an issue that arises from the epidemic of violence against women and girls in our society, in global society, and particularly sexual violence against women and girls. And, you know, I'm perfectly in favour of another inquiry, except that, as far as I'm aware, multiple inquiries have taken place over the past decade, and none of the findings of those inquiries have ever been implemented. So, as much as anything else, in the interest of not wasting public money, it would be nice to see findings from any report that follows actually implemented so that, you know, victims can receive justice and that this isn't a waste of another lip service exercise that wastes public money. I want to just finish by saying this. This is a very pervasive problem in British society. It does cut across every ethnic group. And, you know, there are many, many white grooming gangs in this country as well, and many white people who abuse women. And I don't want that to get lost in the kind of overheated or heated discussion about particular sectors of society. There have been grooming gangs at the highest echelons of the British establishment for centuries. And anybody who only cares about this issue when there's a racial component doesn't really care about the women and girls they claim to care about.
Can we address this ethnicity point, Charlie? Because I know you're right across these reports and all the rest of it, because this often comes up, doesn't it, that people will say, well, hang on, because most paedophiles are white and all the rest of it. What's your response to that?
Well, we live in a majority white country. It's no surprise to see white people as the dominant perpetrator of all crimes, let alone sexual crimes. But when it comes to over-representation of specific forms of child abuse, then the data gets a little bit more confusing. We found, freshly released data last week, found that people from the Pakistani community in Britain were about 4 times more likely to be convicted of this specific form of child abuse, which makes up around 5% of child sexual abuse crimes. And when you look at prosecution data, you do find vast over-representations of South Asians in general, but Pakistanis in particular, when it comes to group localised child sexual exploitation. It points to a pattern of behaviour that some have tied to clannishness, an alternative perspective towards women and girls which completely derides and negates them. But all too often I think we focus on just looking at the victims as only white girls. There's also issues here, particularly in the J report into Rotherham, which found that a lot of the victims were boys as well, but also that other Pakistani girls were being targeted too. Many people from the Sikh community don't like the use of this term Asian because a lot of Sikh girls have been targeted in this abuse and they don't like to be caught up in the over-representation of perpetrators. So there's a lot more data to be gathered, and one of the main problems we've got, and one of the problems that Yvette Cooper is trying to set out in her response, is that many of the police forces just haven't recorded any sufficient data on ethnicity and on perpetrators. What's particularly concerning for me is when I've looked into this on a national level, the areas that seem to struggle the most with recording ethnicity are the areas that have an over-representation of this form of child abuse.
I mean, there's so much you can just hear. All my panel want to come back in on this. There is a lot more to say, and I want to reassure you that we won't stop having this conversation. I know so many people feel passionately about wanting that national inquiry. I certainly do, and obviously, just to labour the point, if you abuse girls, boys, children, whatever colour, creed, whatever it is that you are, you absolutely disgust me. I think everyone knows my feelings on this whole thing. The sooner that we find out and get to the bottom of all of this, quite frankly, the better. And that point about people that have been involved in cover-ups, also finally getting their comeuppance as well, whether that's prison or whatever, that is something that I know that many of you feel very passionately about. Look, after the break, I do need to move on. Kemi Badenoch giving her first major speech of the year. Let's look at that. She reckons a return to conservatism is what we need, and she admits that the Tories made mistakes. She also talks about society being unfair. Let's look at it all in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Lisa, you got in touch with me and you flagged this survey because you were concerned as a parent that your child had been given this to fill out.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter came home from school, she was very confused. She was asking why somebody would want to hurt themselves if they were feeling sad or worried about something. So that led to a conversation that we had, and I actually phoned the school and asked them to send me the survey, which with a lot of pushing, they eventually did send me the survey. And when I read through it, I was just completely shocked at the content. The survey says when I'm feeling worried that maybe I should try cutting or harming myself, because it's in the survey, so that must be an option. I've tried everything else, so why not try this?
It is astonishing that some of these are young children who are perhaps being introduced to these, these abuses for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of 17 different types of drugs, some of which I've actually never heard of myself. I mean, the wording on here is, have you ever got high from taking drugs? I mean...
And we know that some of these behaviours, self-harm, gender dysphoria, taking drugs, are psychologically contagious. Children do them because they see other children do them, or they find out about them from the internet or from surveys like this. So the idea that this is just information gathering and won't go any further than that is ridiculous. There was a similar survey in Scotland, I think, about 3 years ago, where children the same age, 11, 12, 13, were asked about their sex lives. How many times have you had sex in the last year? How did you have sex? Did you use contraception? Totally normalising underage sex. So the idea that children are just mini adults and we can confront them with all the same kind of ideas and dilemmas that adults have to face is just ridiculous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Jake Wallace-Simons alongside me, as is Kieran Andrew. Lots of you getting in touch on this grooming gang situation, the rape gangs. David says Yvette Cooper doing this now is too little, too late. It's closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. Glynis says this is just basically another whitewash. You don't believe that this is going to get the results and the results you want of prosecutions and sacking at the end of it. Philip says this inquiry that she's announcing today is like firing arrows at a target, but with the tips cut off, it's another whitewash. There's not a lot of support for what Yvette Cooper has been suggesting and announcing today. Speaking of today, Kemi Badenoch, she was giving her first major speech of the year. I've got to say, I actually found it quite interesting. She was talking very tough, admitting that the Tories had made lots of mistakes, saying that she will admit that, whereas Keir Starmer's also made loads of mistakes and he won't admit his. And she was talking about the need to return to conservatism in this country. She made a really interesting point as well about fairness. Take a listen to this.
We will rediscover the idea that everyone contributes towards society, not just calculates what they can take out of it. Our society is treating those people who do best badly and the people that do worst well. Everything is upside down. That's the opposite of fairness.
This issue of fairness and particularly unfairness is really key to so many people. It comes through the inbox all the time. Do you agree with what Kemi said there?
I do, yeah. I mean, it really goes to the heart of conservatism as opposed to socialism. On the left, you have these two separate ideas. One is that people should be free to pursue their own lives the way they want to pursue them. But the other is that everybody should be equal, nobody should be better than anybody else. And those two things fundamentally clash, because if you give people the freedom to pursue their own happiness in the way they can, some people are going to be stronger, cleverer, better connected, more social, have different skills, and so you'll get different results. But then if you start to tax those and cut everyone forcibly down to the same level, you then impinge on their freedom. And so I think you end up with a society that feels fundamentally unfair because success is being punished, even though you deserve that success. I think that's what she's referring to.
Do you agree with that, Kieran?
I don't. Listening to Kemi then, or reading some of the transcripts, it's a bit like a violent burglar who has been committing violent burglaries for 14 years, saying, my error was that I didn't wipe my feet on the way in or on the way out. You know, there are many serious failings of the Tory party over the past 14 years. And you know, I think one of the major things the Tories did wrong for themselves is, I mean, I was very happy to see them go, but I think the main thing they did wrong from their own electoral POV is that they left a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Virtually every single sector of society was effed off with them by the time they left office. I think fundamentally what they did was they turned the country into the backdrop against which their psychodramas played out. So, you know, whether it's David Cameron with his over-the-shoulder politics and worrying about Brexit and so on, whether it was Theresa May and the disloyal, unruly people in her party, whether it was Boris Johnson and the prorogation of Parliament and trying to get all of that stuff, whether it was Rishi Sunak, who obviously was living in a post-COVID world, and to an extent his cards were marked in advance for that reason, the Tory party dragged the country into its internal political schisms and psychodramas. I could talk about the very specific policies that I think the Tories presided over that Kemi Badenoch should be looking at, austerity, I think has led to disastrously low growth, and it's also torn at the social fabric of so many parts of our country. We were talking earlier about the grooming gangs. You know, one of the major fixes would be to fund institutions for safeguarding properly. Tories decimated public services through austerity. NHS was gutted in many respects.
I've got to say, though, if Kemi was sitting here now, she'd be shouting, well, hang on, austerity. She would argue austerity was necessary in the form that they took it because of she would argue, the inheritance that they got from the Labour Party.
Well, that's a very different debate, and it will take a long time to litigate it. But I totally disagree from an economic point of view, and so do many economists now. And I think the fact that we had one of the most sluggish recoveries in the G20 bespeaks quite the opposite. And I think, but, you know, austerity is another thing. It's an economic thing. We could talk about it. It had very serious social effects, including unfairness. And she's talking about unfairness. You know, I think one of the major root causes of modern or contemporary unfairness in British society was that, the housing crisis. I mean, the housing crisis, you know, it's a disaster for my generation and the generation below me.
Do you think there's anything that the Tories could do to redeem themselves reputationally? Because that's what Kemi's trying to do. She's trying to put this vast space now between her and the Tories gone by in terms of previous attitudes, behaviours, mistakes, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I've got to say my heart goes out to Kemi, really, because she's got a mountain to climb. She's trying to rebuild trust. Well, that trust was really squandered over the last 14 years of Tory rule by the Tories saying one thing and then doing another, particularly on immigration. They pledged again and again they were going to bring down immigration and instead intentionally allowed it to soar for economic reasons without telling people that's what they were doing. Now, Kemi now, of course, is in opposition. She's out of power, so she can't really ever put her money where her mouth is. People are not going to be able, voters aren't going to be able to look at her and say, well, you know what, she said that and she's done it. All she can do is say it, because she's got no power to do it. And so that puts the Tories in a really difficult position. And actually, I had this conversation with a Tory shadow minister just around Christmas. In fact, I think you were part of that conversation, Michelle. And I said to him, well, what do you think, you know, what are you going to do about this trust deficit? And he went, I don't know, what do you think? And I said, well, it's not my job. And that's where the Tories are. There isn't an easy answer for this.
Well, I know that many of you, because you tell me this often, many of you I know did previously support the Tories. So did you listen to Kemi? We were inspired by what she had to say. And if you're someone that left the Tories, would you ever see yourself returning under her stewardship or not? Coming up after the break, I want to talk to you about the situation in Gaza. A ceasefire could indeed be imminent. There's so many different strands that we need to explore on this one, not least what this would mean here in the UK. We'll look at it all after the break.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Across northern areas, likely staying cloudy, windy, but remaining fairly mild. Cooler elsewhere, though those grey skies are sticking around. Also a chance we could see some rain and drizzle, particularly to the far northwest, where we see some frontal systems sweeping in. Also fairly windy here at times too. But elsewhere, high pressure largely holding on. But we do see a shift in our wind direction, more of a southerly. So that's pushing up any cloud from the south into northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England as we head into the overnight period. It should be largely dry, however. That's away from the far northwest, though we'll see outbreaks of rain and drizzle, and also getting rather windy here overnight too, with a risk of gales in the very far north. Largely mild across the northwest, though in any clearer spells it's likely feeling chilly. Across Scotland to start on Friday, a fairly damp start, plenty of cloud around, just a chance we could see some clearer spells in the far east and rather windy across the far northwest coast as well. Also rather windy around western coasts of Northern Ireland, once again fairly cloudy here with some drizzly spots in the far west. Elsewhere across England and Wales, once again largely dry but plenty of cloud around, so a rather grey start to end the week. But through the course of the day there is a chance we could see some brightness just to the northeast of any hills or high ground, but for most it is going to be quite a cloudy end to the week. Once again with those outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, perhaps western parts of Northern Ireland, but elsewhere remaining largely dry. And it's probably going to feel slightly cooler for most. That's away from the far northwest where once again it's rather mild for the time of year. To start the weekend, once again, plenty of grey skies around, though we could see some brightness towards the afternoon, particularly across parts of Wales. Northern parts of England is the best of any brightness, but still that cloud lingering on across the far southeast of the country. And once again, further outbreaks of rain and drizzle edging into the far northwest. Still plenty of cloud around for the second half of the weekend, which means temperatures are going to struggle, so often feeling chilly.
The latest GB News travel.
Evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in South Yorkshire on the M18. The motorway is partly blocked southbound at Junction 3 south of Doncaster, where a lorry is broken down. And the M6 in Staffordshire is currently blocked southbound from Junction 15, the Stoke-on-Trent exit, up to the Stafford services following an accident causing lengthy queues on the approach. In the West Midlands on the M42, the inside lane is closed northbound just after Junction 6. The Birmingham Airport turnoff where a car has broken down. And in Bedfordshire on the M1, the southbound motorway is partly blocked to Junction 12 at Flitwick following an accident. In Berkshire, the M4 partly blocked westbound just off the M25 after a car broke down, and trains are suspended on the West Coast main line between Crewe and Runcorn after a train broke down near to Hertford. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Dewbs & Co with you till 7 o'clock tonight. If you're just joining the programme, you're very welcome indeed alongside me. A reminder as to my panel, I've got Jake Wallace-Simons, the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and a new face on this programme, Kieran Adrenew, the political commentator. Everyone is very welcome tonight. Now, I do want to look at the situation over in the Middle East, because quite a monumental moment yesterday when a ceasefire was announced, a deal and a hostage release scheme apparently imminent. David Lammy, he took to the floor of the Commons today to speak out. Take a listen to him.
Now is not the time for any backtracking. Both sides must implement each phase of the deal in full and on time. The history of this conflict is littered with missed opportunities. It would be a tragedy to let slip the chance before us.
Well, there you go. And I can tell you there's really heated and different opinions on this topic. Jake, let me start with you. What was your reaction then when you heard about that imminent ceasefire potentially?
Well, I have mixed feelings, really. I mean, on the one hand, of course, the idea of getting 33 hostages home in the first batch was very moving, and something that a lot of people around the world have been really holding their breath about, including, by the way, Emily Damari, we think, who's a British Spurs fan. Yeah. And, of course, the end to the fighting in Gaza is extremely welcome, not least for the sake of the Palestinians who've been caught up in this, particularly the civilians, of course, displaced and maimed and killed. However, the hesitation that I had was really about, has Hamas been destroyed enough, been diminished enough? Yes, it's been diminished by 80%, but the real tragedy would be that if, as a result of this, good news of a ceasefire, Hamas is able to build back and carry out another October the 7th, as it has vowed to do, if it could. Benny Gantz, the opposition leader, Israeli opposition leader, last March said that you can't put out 80% of a fire because it will burn back. And that's the real fear. So, and that's obviously linked to the question of what will come next. How will Gaza be governed afterwards? How will Hamas, the remainder of Hamas, be repressed? And what will the new government look like? And that's an unanswered question, sadly, at the moment as well. So all of those fears, I think, are wrapped up into it. But ultimately, I think my predominant feeling was one of great relief at the prospect of having hostages back and no more fighting in Gaza, although the deal isn't over the line just yet.
It certainly isn't, actually. I think there's supposed to be a cabinet meeting where that was ratified earlier on today. That, of course, I have to say, didn't happen. Kieran, where are you on this?
Well, first of all, I hope it's respected. Of course I do. I hope that it's honoured, because Palestinians in Gaza, people in the region, but especially, of course, Palestinians in Gaza desperately, desperately need it to work. I would also just add that reports are that over the past 12 hours since the talk of this ceasefire first properly solidified, 70-odd Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. So that doesn't bode terribly well. But
how many were civilians, do you know?
I'm going to... Excuse me.
How many were civilians? How many were combatants?
I'm not going to answer that right now because I don't know the answer, Jake, but...
It's quite pertinent, though, isn't it?
It's pertinent, yeah, it's pertinent, but, you know, you don't have the answer to that either. So I think it's better that we just focus on the points.
I guess I'm just speaking about it because the context is that usually casualty figures are normally presented.
Let me just say this.
Without any recognition of how many of them are competent,
Sorry,
which is a vital
interrupt you.
point.
I expect to be able to finish my point.
Please do. Go ahead.
If you are wondering what's going on at home, by the way, so the figure that Kieran's mentioning there, that will have come from the Palestinian Health Authority. I think that's what people are getting at, but carry on.
Yeah, so... I mean, we could deal with that separately. 70-odd people have been killed. That's being reported by the international media. And it's very interesting, Jake, to me, that you immediately leap to, oh, it's Hamas that's backpedaling, it's Hamas that's stalling, when actually most of the Israeli media has been reporting.
I didn't say that.
You said that in the green room before we came in.
In the green room, sure, but not just now.
OK, but in the green room, you said to me, Hamas has been stalling. Sorry to reveal what we talked about in the green room, but you said that to me. The point is that most Israeli media has been reporting that actually it's Ben Gvir and Smotrich who have been holding this ceasefire up. And actually, sorry, but that's consistent.
What we said in the green room, we did talk about Smotrich and Ben Gvir as well, didn't we?
Talking over each other benefits.
Hang on, because no one was in the green room, and they're at home. They don't know what the green room is.
That's why I was.
Fine.
That's why I was.
Before we came in here, we were sitting on a sofa, and you said that you thought it was Hamas that had scuppered it. Where in actual fact, most of the Israeli media thinks otherwise. Israeli media, by the way, and that's consistent, isn't it, with the way that Ben Gvir and Smotrich have conducted themselves for the past 6 months. I think there's a wider point here, Michelle, that I want to make. This ceasefire, the terms of this ceasefire are basically identical to the ceasefires that were going to be negotiated 6 months ago, that were intimated 6 months ago. So Ben Gvir boasted numerous times, and Haaretz has done lots and lots of very good investigative work about how, for political reasons, that was deliberately not embraced. Many Palestinians have died since, and by the way, many Israelis have died since as well.
Sure, can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I mean, you're right. I said that Hamas was backpedaling, which I read, by the way, in the Israeli media, so maybe we're not reading the same Israeli media, but leaving green room conversations aside, you're right. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, I hold no love for them. They are contemptible in my view. And the fact is that they have been boasting recently about scuppering deals or attempting to, and Smotrich has threatened to leave the cabinet in protest against this deal. So let me just put that on the record. But I think I would also point out that if this deal had been done in May, Rafah would not have been taken by the IDF, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, would be alive, Ismail Haniyeh, the other leader of Hamas, would be alive. Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, would be alive. Hamas would still be very powerful. Hezbollah would still be intact and very powerful. And the Iranians would still have their air defences and be sitting pretty in Tehran. And Assad would probably not have fallen. Yeah. So it's only the fact that those things have happened between May and now that have so weakened Hamas that it's made this possible ceasefire a prospect. Okay. And so we need to recognise that this has been a huge victory and achievement, not just for Israel, but in terms of peace in the region and for global security, to get rid of these horrendous terrorist murderers and to reduce their power and their grip across the region is a favour to us all.
Michelle, can I come back on that?
Yeah, but let me ask you a question as well, though, because he just called Hamas terrorist murderers. Is that how you regard Hamas?
I regard Hamas, they are a terrorist group. That's what they refer to themselves as. They also formed a government, yeah. But, of course, October 7th is not something I'm going to sit here and condone. Let me be very clear about that, OK? So let's just get that out the way straight away so we can move on to where we are. But I understand why you asked me, Michelle. OK, first of all, in a way, you've kind of proven my point, Jake. You know, the Carthaginian peace that you want to achieve by completely wiping out Hamas.
Peace?
Carthaginian peace.
Okay.
You've already said is impossible.
Have I?
Yeah, you said earlier on you were worried that by that this ceasefire comes at a time when Hamas hasn't been totally destroyed. You can't put out 80% of a fire. Sorry, but let me ask you.
It doesn't mean it's not important.
OK. Mm-hmm. How many dead children do you need before you're satisfied that Hamas has been destroyed? Because let me tell you something, it ain't going to happen.
Well,
the way you
then.
radicalise people, the way you radicalise the next generation of people in Gaza is by doing precisely what you have been cheerleading from the start.
What kind of a question is that? How many dead? I mean, I don't want any dead children. Not a single dead child. Do I?
You could have fooled me. Sorry.
You could have fooled. When have I? What are you talking about?
I have to say this to you, Jake. We chatted outside. You're a charming guy. Nonetheless, you have been a implacable supporter, propagandist, actually, of this genocide since day one. And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of your former staff at the JC. We both know that's true.
Right. OK. Well, let's leave those rather regrettable ad hominem attacks aside.
It's not ad hominem, it's relevant.
And return to the matter in hand. As I've said consistently on this programme, you know, the ceasefire is a great thing, not just because hostages will hopefully be getting out, but also because Palestinian civilians will no longer suffer and the war will end. Right. Nobody wants war, you know, including myself. And the fact that you shake your head and accuse me of being a genocide supporter, I'm afraid, does you no favours at all. There is no genocide in Gaza, as everybody sensible knows, including Keir Starmer, by the way. And so the fact that you've cited that smear in smearing me, I think, is pretty revealing of where you're coming from.
So everybody's sensible. All right, the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world, by the way, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Gallant and Netanyahu, as we know. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and by the way, an enormous and growing pool of Holocaust and genocide scholars and historians, including Amos Goldberg. Amos Goldberg is the head of Holocaust Studies, Israeli scholar, head of Holocaust Studies at Jerusalem University.
Right, sure. I mean, you're accusing me of propaganda. I mean, you pulled out the biggest propaganda greatest hits, a mixture of misinformation, lies, fabrications and hard left Jews that anybody ever could. So, I mean, the fact is...
No, hang on, let Jake speak.
The fact is, you know, you seem to have come on this programme mainly with the objective of attacking me personally, which I wasn't expecting, but I was expecting to receive a lot of this propaganda. The fact is that the Israeli army has killed fewer civilians per combatant than any other army in history. And that's a fact. I didn't make that up. It's a fact. It's been verified by military experts from all around the world, including people from Britain as well. I've been with military experts from Britain to Israel and Gaza, met the IDF, seen what's going on, seen how they target very, very carefully terrorists and not civilians. As a result, they've killed fewer civilians per combatant than any other army in the world, despite the propaganda.
It's not ad hominem. I'm not attacking you personally. It's relevant. It's absolutely relevant because you are extremely influential in this debate, Jake. And it's absolutely relevant that people who worked for you said that you had become a tool of Netanyahu talking points, that you had turned the newspaper for Jewish Chronicle into a...
This is a totally separate debate. I'm quite happy to have it with you. I'm quite happy to have it with you.
Kieran, you can't accuse him of this stuff and then not let him respond.
But I also just wanted to accuse him of a couple more things.
Well, no, you can't actually. This isn't a soapbox for you just to make accusations.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and this isn't a Jake Wallace-Simons trial. I'm sure you'll appreciate that, and nobody would want it to be. But what I would say is that, look, feelings are very high in the Jewish community as in the wider community. There is a big left-right divide. And yes, there have been attacks from the left against the right, from the right against the left, and that's what you're talking about. Yeah. But to present it as if I'm I think you called me a genocidal propagandist? I mean, you're the only propagandist here, and you're the only one talking about genocide.
OK, so...
hold on. What do you make to this at home? Because there will be you can hear it here. There's very passionate feelings on both sides of this. Where are you at it? Where are you on all of this? Get in touch and tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's been an unsettled week across parts of the Mediterranean, and there's some further very wet and windy weather to come for some places, especially around Sardinia, towards Italy and Greece. Also, Algeria and Tunisia having some very heavy thunderstorms. Some places could see rainfall totals building up in excess of 300 millimetres with strong winds and even some hill snow to go with it. Away from this, though, a lot of relatively fine, often sunny and quite warm weather too. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. We're with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I want to just ask you, we've just been talking about the situation in the ceasefire or potential ceasefire in Gaza. You're hearing some very passionate feelings on both sides of this issue. One of the things that's been happening here in this country, because I do want to try and bring it back here if possible, every single weekend we've had marches now for quite some time calling for ceasefires and all the rest of it, very strong feelings. Again, the Metropolitan Police, they issued a statement very recently basically asking the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, who organised these protests, to change their route. They were concerned that it would have severe disruption to a central London synagogue. I want your thoughts on this, Jake. How has it been as a Jewish person, you know, having these marches in London every single weekend anyway?
Well, I think it's mainly affected Jews who wish to go to synagogue in central London. There are 5 possible routes that the Palestinian activists could march along. There are 7 routes. 2 of them go past synagogues and 5 do not. Mm-hmm. Those synagogues have had to suffer marches going past week after week. Attendance there is down by 50% some weeks. They've had to cancel events, cancel celebrations. One synagogue was besieged by marchers for a period before eventually the police moved them on. They've been spat at, had flags draped across them and so forth. So a very intimidating atmosphere. And what the police have said is that they would like the Palestinian activists to use the 5 marches that don't pass the synagogues so that Jews can go to worship in peace on a Saturday, which is the Jewish Sabbath. And that has been met with fury from the Palestinian activists who have vowed, some of them, to resist this request by the police, by all means necessary. And I think that this just really goes to the heart of what's motivating these marches. If it really was out of concern for Palestinian human rights, out of concern for the casualties of war in Gaza, then they would have no problem marching somewhere else, one of the 5 other routes throughout London, and not past the synagogues, because they wouldn't have anything against Jews going about their business, families, old people in London. However, the fact they've been furiously resisting this request by the police really says a lot about them, I think.
You're Palestinian, Kieran. I think I do need to make that point. What do you think to what Jake just said?
Well, there have been, I don't know how many demonstrations now, but we can assume nearly 24, I think, in the past year and a half since the genocide started. And many millions of people will have marched across those near 24 marches. I've been on maybe half of them. There are tens of thousands, probably hundreds, in fact, certainly hundreds of thousands of Jewish people who have marched on those marches with us as well. And many of them, by the way, have done so...
Sorry, because I'm just listening and I'm trying to be polite, but I do just want to... Sorry, I do just want to interrupt. You're repeatedly calling this a genocide, and I know my viewers, and I can hear what my viewers are saying on the inbox. Yeah. Many people will be shouting at your use of that word, and they'll be pointing to the code of Hamas and all the rest of it, where it's Hamas that actually state that they want to eradicate the Jewish people, and they will be saying that a genocide has taken place that side. So I do just want to... Because we're throwing these kind of terms around genocide, and I'm just kind of sitting here allowing it to happen, and I'm not really comfortable with it, but carry on.
So can I just come back on that?
Well, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So when you have the Israeli president saying there are no innocent civilians in Gaza at the beginning of this, when you have Gallant... Sorry, Isaac Herzog.
He didn't say that.
He did. I think you need to do some more reading.
No, Isaac Herzog would never say...
OK, we can,
say,
have a little look.
Possibly you misinterpreted.
No, I think you need to read a bit more.
Well, certainly he didn't...
Yoav Gallant...
I know him, he wouldn't...
Who was the then... You can ask him personally. Yoav Gallant, who was the then Defence Minister, said, we are fighting human animals.
Hamas, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't make that clear, though, did he, Jake?
That was obviously what he meant. That's what he meant. Of course he meant.
Hang on, because it is obvious that they're trying to fight Hamas, isn't it? I mean,
Is it when
it doesn't mean Palestinian.
At a minimum, 47,000 people have been slaughtered.
And how many of them are
20,000 of them are children. 20,000.
That's not true. That is not true.
Right.
That is not
true. What are you
basing
basing that not being true of?
Well, because the Israeli army has said that about half of them are combatants. Yeah. So therefore, you've got half of them, about 20,000 fighting men, and 20,000 children. No women, no other men, nothing else.
So there's a theme emerging. There's a theme emerging.
Totally wrong.
Fair enough. There's a theme emerging.
I've only got about a minute left in this programme, by the way.
I just want to say this. There is a theme emerging across what you're saying, Jake. The UN, many bodies within the UN, the ICJ, the ICC, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, they're all in a conspiracy together. And the only forces in the world to be believed on any matter are the IDF and the Israeli government.
I'm saying don't believe Hamas. I'm saying don't believe Hamas. Don't articulate their propaganda.
Jake,
That's
with respect, I think you're talking...
patronise me.
I think you're increasingly...
What I'm trying to say is
Hold
don't believe
on, hang on
Hamas.
a second. I do just want to make it clear as well. You know, you're saying, everyone's kind of saying all this kind of stuff. By your own admission, Hamas, of course, I do have to remind everyone, are actually a terrorist organisation. Look, there's obviously very passionate feelings here on this subject, and I know that you guys at home will feel very passionately about it as well. I think that we'll all be united in suggesting that actually what anyone really wants, any side of the fence, is for people to actually be able to live in peace, whoever those people are, and for all of this kind of fighting just somehow to try and reach an end. But is this the situation that will finally create it? Who knows? The next 24, 48, 72 hours will be crucial when it comes to that. But for now, that's all I've got time for. Gents, thank you. Thanks to each and every one of you at home. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed boiler repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Across northern areas, likely staying cloudy, windy, but remaining fairly mild. Cooler elsewhere, though those grey skies are sticking around. Also a chance we could see some rain and drizzle, particularly to the far northwest, where we see some frontal systems sweeping in. Also fairly windy here at times too. But elsewhere, high pressure largely holding on. But we do see a shift in our wind direction, more of a southerly, so that's pushing up any cloud from the south into northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England as we head into the overnight period. It should be largely dry, however, that's away from the far northwest, though we'll see outbreaks of rain and drizzle, and also getting rather windy here overnight too, with a risk of gales and the